Intersexed persons, that is, born with physical or genetical characteristics of both sexes, are 1 in 1500.
This is Exploring Unusual Sex, the podcast about odd stuff that helps understanding everyday matters. Our host today, from Milan, Italy, is author, journalist and personal coach Ayzad.
Welcome! In this episode we talk about cheeky auctions, Scandinavian burritos, gay batallions, sapiosexuality and much more. Let's get starting, and the first topic is good manners at sex parties. The big night has come. You are finally going to a sex party. But how are you supposed to behave in these circumstances? Let's begin by clarifying that true erotic parties are nothing like the Eyes Wide Shut's famous scene, which is taken as the general reference whenever the subject arises. There are no passwords, no mysterious and unsettling cults, no backwards sung Romanian masses, and, above all, there are no strange ceremonies where everyone moves in sync like in a ballet. Even discounting the fact that participants are there for pretty different reasons than following a choreography, can you imagine all those people practicing their moves and figures in their living rooms? No, true events are of two major types. They are either private receptions by someone inviting carefully chosen people who share the same tastes and lifestyle, or semi-public affairs. This means that they are held in specifically rented spaces, or more probably in adult clubs where you have to be a carded member of a private association, otherwise you technically incur in the crime of gross indecency in public. Then again, your local laws may vary, of course. The cost can range between recoupling the actual expenses to several hundred euros, dollars, or whatever currency you use. In this latter case, make sure the price is justified, since scams are always a possibility. In particular, be careful with places where single men can A. enter and B. do so only by paying a much higher fee than couples. Usually, this means that prostitution is involved, which, besides being possibly illegal, always ruins the spontaneity of an adult party. In any case, double-check the required dress code. Casual outfits are always badly received, and your best bet is on an elegant evening dress for ladies and formal attire for gentlemen. Also, some parties may make special materials like latex or leather mandatory, or certain colors, or a specific theme. Not following these indications not only makes you look bad, but carries the risk of getting bounced. Serious venues will inform you about the availability of a changing room and wardrobe to change on the premises.
Let me interrupt you just a sec for an important reminder. The episode notes contain all the links to the topics mentioned in the podcast, and if you want to dig deeper, you will find hundreds of further articles on the Ayzad.com website.
Even when the party is held in a crowded disco at deafening volume, remember that the cornerstone principle is to be well-mannered and respectful of everyone. Much more respectful than you'd be in a so-called normal club, especially because you are otherwise very likely to be asked to leave in the proverbial kind and determinate way of bouncers. Nobody is obliged to do anything. If you are proposed something you don't like, a smile and a "no thank you" will suffice to refuse. Likewise, if you see something you don't approve, you can just move away, and for everyone's safety and well-being, refraining from drinking too much or indulging in controlled substances is always advisable. The common idea of a sex party looks like a pile of intertwining nude bodies. The reality is that such situations almost never happen, for matters of personal preferences, safer sex and common comfort. Do not touch anyone, not even possible sex slaves, before asking permission first. This is true both for groping and other types of touching. The same common sense holds for possible unattended sex toys and tools. Unless explicitly stated, consider them private property not to be touched. However, if they are for everyone's convenience, remember to clean them before and after use with the disinfectants you should find close by, and of course to cover anything that can get into contact with bodily fluids with a condom. Another frequent misunderstanding is to take for granted that all participants want to interact with others. Usually, most people prefer just to show off and watch others play instead, so it is always best to keep a polite distance without barging into ongoing activities. To propose, one look is enough, and if someone wants to involve you, they will clearly signal it. The last rule to follow at an erotic party is to be discreet. This holds during the night itself by keeping your comments to a whisper, but even more later on, avoiding any mention of the participants to those who weren't there. Not everyone enjoys having their private entertainment to be publicly known.
The Sexual Explorers Manifesto is a global initiative to spread a healthier and more positive approach to sexuality. You can easily find it with an online search, but in the meantime, let's take a closer look at one of its 15 items. Today's one says:
Knowledge is pleasure. The single most defining factor for sexual pleasure is the knowledge of yourself and what you are doing. Just like with any natural and yet complex activity, like swimming or singing, instinct is merely the initial impulse for sex. After that, competence comes into play, learned through study and practice. Information allows to overcome prejudices and wrong beliefs. It makes possible to live relationships safely and parenthood in a conscious way. It opens access to unexpected techniques and pleasures. It helps to live ethical relations and to fully respect your partners. It offers the tools to face possible objective difficulties in a positive manner instead of getting overwhelmed by them. Furthermore, the path itself of education to sex can be experienced in a fun way, ideally sharing it with a partner. The only advice is to choose reliable sources and educators and, especially when dealing with elaborate practices, to study them thoroughly before experimenting.
This is your moment. In every episode, we pick one question among those sent to our expert at podcast@ayzad.com. So let's get writing to get an answer like this.
For this episode of Exploring Unusual Sex, I picked a seriously hard question from Pudgy Marmot, who definitely convinced me that you are pulling my leg with this nicknames thing. Anyway, she asked, I take pride in being a decent expert of freaky dirty deeds, but when somebody mentioned bundling, I didn't know the first things about it, nor I couldn't find anything online. What's that? I admit that to find an explanation I had to check a pretty old book, but here it is. Bundling or tearing was a classic pastime of Scandinavian fiancés or old, who use it to warm up in the chilly nights of the Great North. In a pinch, that would be the super fun practice of sleeping in the same bed fully clothed, without touching, and possibly separated by a wooden board or even actually sewn in under the duvets. In certain families, just to be sure, mothers took care of tying their daughters' legs together and affix a wax seal over the node, more or less what you do with brandy bottles you want to age, sad and alone, in a dark cellar. In truth, even back then it was assumed that as soon as they were left alone, the couple would do everything in their power to have fun within their imposed limits. In fact, the idea was to allow them to gradually explore sex without getting into unexpected complications, all the while strengthening their mutual desire and love. Very Scandinavian indeed. After solving this doubt too, I want to remind everyone that sex should always be a pleasure, not a problem, even when it is uncommon. However, if you are experiencing issues, I can help you as a personal coach to discover together the ideal strategy to win back your happiness in this field. You can get in touch through my website ayzad.com, spelled Ayzad, and saying you are a listener of this podcast will earn you a 20% discount on the first session.
This episode is almost over, but we still have time to read one entry from XXX, the Dictionary of Unusual Sex, available in online bookstores everywhere, but in Italian only for the moment.
Today's entry is Reflecto Porn. This was a curious variation on exhibitionism that peaked in 2004, when eBay was flooded with very particular photos of polished items. Let me clarify here. To be particular were not the items, but the photographs themselves. If you looked closely, you could notice reflected on the shiny surface of the objects the person shooting the picture, nude and often mysteriously grinning. For a while, a sort of war between the exhibitionists and the moderators erupted. The former published hundreds of photos, while the others deleted them as quickly as possible. After about 1 year, the reflector porn fad dwindled to almost nothing. But check out for it the next time you are buying something online. Surprises are all around us. And that really was it. Before leaving you with one last unusual sex fact, I want to thank you for listening and invite you to follow me on my social networks and above all on my website, Ayzad.com, which is also the ideal place to sign up for my newsletter. That way you'll get straight in your inbox new articles, reviews, invitations to events, and the notification for new podcast episodes which you can listen to and comment pretty much everywhere, like iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Spreaker, and so on. If you liked exploring unusual sex, I would also like to invite you to fill the Tell Me About You form you can find linked in the episode notes, so you will help me make the next episodes even better and closer to your tastes. Finally, you can also lend a hand by telling your friends about this podcast and writing about it on your social networks. Thanks, and before moving on to the next episode, here's the fact I promised you. In the year 370 before Christ, the secret band of thieves was a battalion composed exclusively by homosexual couples, and it wasn't beaten for 33 years.